if you're using that, oh, that would never happen to my family as an excuse, just don't. Hear me loud and clear.
Too many families discover too late that love isn't enough to protect their legacy. No will, no plan, just heartbreak, confusion, and costly court battles. But what if estate planning wasn't intimidating and instead felt empowering? Jenny Rozelle is the legal unicorn breaking down barriers. As host of The Legal Tea and a nationally respected estate planning attorney, she transforms legal chaos into clarity. Today, she's here to help you protect what matters with wisdom, heart, and stories that stick. I'm Larry Sprung, your host for the Midland Money Mindset and founder and wealth advisor of Midland Financial. Let's dive into today's show. Well, I am super excited, as I mentioned today, to have Jenny Rozelle, owner and attorney at Indiana Estate and Elder Law. Welcome to the show, Jenny.
Thank you so much for having me. I love your energy level. We have the same energy, so it should be a good time.
It's a lot of espressos early in the morning. It's very, very helpful, very helpful. But yes, I agree. Thank you. So, one of the things that our listeners really are enamored by and love to hear is, about the entrepreneurial journey. So we'll talk a lot about what you're doing today at Indiana Estate and Elder Law. But to get a sense of, who you are and how you got there, can you give us a little bit of a background of your journey to becoming the owner of that firm?
Yeah. Well, it's a long journey, so I'll try to keep it at a Cliff Notes version. I actually started at the law firm at the front desk. And way back in the day, I'm of the age that you used to find jobs on Craigslist, right? And I got out of college and was like, I think I want to go to law school, but I know it's just as much as a financial investment. So let's see if I actually enjoy it. And so I just threw my resume out to anyone that would take it. And the founder of the law firm that I now own gave me a chance, interviewed me. I ended up taking the job. She held me accountable to a few years after taking the law school admission test, helped me with the application process, got through law school, got through the bar exam. And about that time is when she was ready to retire. And so at that point, I really transitioned from being, just an attorney to that business owner side of things. It's been quite a journey and kind of a compressed time. So super, super grateful for that journey nonetheless.
Yeah. Did you have the entrepreneurial bug early on, or was this something that just came about later on in your journey?
I think at one point in my life, I probably would have said no to that question. But, hindsight's always 2020, right? My parents, they were small business owners. I watched them grind. There were many times they owned a couple little small town grocery stores, and I would sit in the back room and watch VHS video, movies and help on my mom's typewriter. And so maybe it was from that I just, it kind of came natural to me. So at one point I would have said no, but now in the seat that I'm in, it's very normal and very, very much something I enjoy too, because being an attorney and being a business owner, two very different things.
Yeah. Yeah, that reminds me of the story of the baker who loves baking and loves cooking, and they open up a bakery, and next thing they know, they're doing super well. And a year later, they realize they're not baking as much because they're taking care of the books, the staffing, et cetera. And then, several years down the line, they're not doing any baking. So, it morphs a bit. But it does sound like it was in your DNA, and maybe just didn't realize it or recognize it as early as some others. But it seems like it was there from mom and dad. So let's talk about estate planning, because I think, oftentimes people, when they think about estate planning, they think about it being, that they're too young to start the estate planning process. And why do you think it's so beneficial for people to actually start that process early?
Yeah, I think estate planning is one of those words that people automatically, most people's brains go to, I'll take care of that when I get older. I'll take care of that, I'll wait until I retire or when I'm, in my elder years. But from my seat and from my perspective, I see a lot of stuff, Larry. I see, people that get diagnosed with just awful medical things in their 20s, their 30s, their 40s. And it's a really yucky thing to think about and to navigate. But I think what I would say is, no matter your age, you're not immune to something bad happening, whether it's a medical event, whether it's a car accident, whatever it is. I'm a little bit of a daredevil. I've gone skydiving. I've done
Mhm.
those sort of things that put me at a higher risk of something happening to me. And so I think I would say that really just understanding that we are all human and we're not immune to bad things happening. And I'm kind of an advocate for even starting that conversation for kids that are 18. I think so often, we look at those kids and they are kids. They are
Mhm.
kids, but legally they're not. And I tell parents and grandparents when I'm talking about this topic that, if your kid or grandkid gets food poisoning while they're in college, or maybe they're going to study abroad and need someone to take care of things back home, take care of their little measly checking account that has $500 in it, whatever. You have to have these very basic documents in place starting really at that age, of 18. And those just kind of, expand as we get older. So when we maybe start having kids, we need to get more documents to put guardianship in place. So
Mhm.
it's such an important thing for people to consider. And I totally recognize that it is not a fun thing to talk about and think about, but it is so, so important.
Yeah, so let's talk about that 18-year-old, right? Because that's something that we talk about with very often with the families we serve, and I practice what I talk about in reality, and what I mean by that is when both my boys turned 18, I immediately the day after their birthday they signed power of attorneys and healthcare proxies, and it came in handy for my older son especially, and I share that story very often with the families we serve, because I think as a parent, we think about our 18-year-old as still a child more or less, and we're paying their tuition, and they're on our insurance, so we think we're in control, but legally that's not the case. They're an adult. So why is it so important to have that power of attorney and healthcare proxy in place as they turn 18? And this is really regardless of whether they go to college or not.
Yeah.
I think it's more important if they go to college and go away. But I mean, even those 18-year-olds that may not be going to school, but they're traveling with their friends, maybe backpacking across Europe or something along those lines, these documents are still so important. Why,
Yeah.
why is that?
Yeah, it's because they are considered to be an adult, legally speaking. And I would assume most states, anytime I talk about estate planning, I try to keep things nice and high level and general and not state specific to, my state of Indiana. Um, but most states, if not all, but I would assume most states have something called a healthcare consent law that basically puts people in place to make healthcare decisions for someone when they lack documents. Where that could be problematic is if I use an 18-year-old, their mom and dad are going to have equal authority. Maybe mom and dad don't get along so well. So maybe the benefit of a document would be to say, I want mom first and dad second. Um, so there is those laws that support people in healthcare decision making. If they do not have the documents, it would just be problematic if the pecking order isn't the order you would want. Now, there is no such thing as like an automatic pecking order for financial decision making. And so that's really when the rubber meets the road, is because there isn't this natural pecking order. If something happens, mom, dad, whoever walks into the bank, they don't have authority to even, speak about your account, or they don't have authority to, work with, an accountant to file your measly little return. I mean, It's so important whether or not you have, you're heading off to college or not. And the simple reason being they are considered an adult, even
Yeah.
though maybe they're not adulting
In your
behavior.
mind. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that the important thing to remember is also, to your point, every state is different. Even if you're in a state that has this kind of laid out pecking order or laying out who could potentially, talk on your behalf, the institution that you're working with has to know what those rules and laws are also. And I remember when we were talking about my son, when he was having some health issues with the food on his college campus, and we tried to get him out of the meal plan there. The first thing they told us was, we can't talk to you. And whether they could or they couldn't, maybe they didn't know what the rules and regulations were, simply us saying, oh, wait a minute. Yes, you can. We have a healthcare proxy. Where should we fax or email it? Right then and there, the guard went down and we didn't have to get into a fight whether they could or they couldn't, because we had the document at that point to prove it. So I think, having that document, even if there are those rules in place, are extremely helpful, because then you don't have to get in that argument of you knowing the rules versus them not knowing it. Because sometimes it was like a grad student we were working with in an office in the college. They didn't really know what the rules were. Perhaps,
Great point.
So, one of the things we often talk about with the families we serve is the power in simplification and simplifying your assets, in terms of location, not having money all over the place, really having a handle on where things are in that organization. Why is organization so important when it comes to this type of planning?
It makes me smile. It makes me giggle a little bit, because I think people are convinced that there's a big brother out there that when something happens, whether it's incapacity, whether it's death, that someone like me can just, page the big brother and say, give me all this person's records. That big brother does not exist. I promise you it doesn't. It would make my life a lot easier if it existed, but it doesn't. And so simplification is so important, because when I meet with families, whether there's, some sort of incapacity or after passing, when there's stuff spread out all over the place, it is quite literally a real life finding needles and haystacks. And I always, tell people, if you're making people like me work harder, that's probably going to translate to your bill. If I'm having to search for those needles alongside the executor or trustee, that's probably going to translate into a higher bill. And so the advantages of simplification is, when you really boil it down, is just making things easier on whoever has to take that baton later in life, make their job so much easier.
That's so vitally important when you talk about being an executor or even a trustee of a trust, which we, maybe we'll talk about later as well. I think people feel so honored that their loved one appointed them into this capacity. But I'm sure you can attest to it, because we've seen it firsthand. It's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing in the way that this person, this individual, this loved one feels so strongly that you can handle this stuff for them. But at the same time, it is not an easy task, and it's very time consuming. And, most people are like, wow, I wish I wasn't in this position, because a lot of times it's very difficult as a result. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. I always say, regardless of the type of plan, even if someone invests in more advanced planning, like with a trust, being an executor, being a trustee is not an easy job, even for those that have a perfectly curated estate plan. It doesn't wave magic pixie dust on your plan when you've done it. I mean, there's still time and work that has to be done. A perfect example that I share with clients all the time is, after we pass away, regardless of your plan, regardless of who's in charge, the house doesn't just magically clean itself out. We still got to clean it out, and we may have to, paint that wall and replace that carpeting, and coordinating the contractors doing all of that. And so there's always going to be time and work, even in the most perfect estate plan ever. Yeah.
The stuff that you don't really think about.
Yes.
So. Imagine a relationship where financial conversations don't feel stressful, but actually bring you joy. We've designed a guide to help you have positive, meaningful money conversations with your partner. This isn't just another budgeting tool, it's a roadmap for building trust and connection. So if you're ready to start a joyful money journey with your partner, go to Midland.us/couplesjoy and download your free guide. Transform your financial future together starting today. One of the things here in New York, where we're located, is probate is an absolute nightmare. I mean, it's a very long, drawn-out process. It's not an easy one. So, planning goes a long way for people who live here. Now, I've also heard you share that your longest probate battle was 6 years, which is another lengthy amount of time. What is the best way for people to put themselves in a position to be able to avoid probate court and the whole probate process?
I promise Larry is not paying me to say what I'm about to say. I think it's the best way is to set yourself up with professionals around you to coordinate a plan to avoid that process. Whether we avoid probate through, I always call it Operation Beneficiary Designate Everything. That will work for some folks and some families. That's a perfectly acceptable way that we can avoid probate. Or whether that, maybe the client, the family may be more into trust land to avoid probate. And there's no magic pill answer here of okay, everyone has to do a trust to avoid probate, or everyone just needs to put beneficiary designations on everything to avoid probate. It really depends on the family setup, the family dynamic, what's going on with beneficiaries, what types of assets there are, what are your goals. It depends on a lot of things in terms of what way, people like you and I, Larry, are really going to gravitate towards. And so to really answer that question, it's really surround yourself with proper professionals to get you in a setup, a plan to be able to avoid probate, because it's totally avoidable.
Let's shift gears for a second. You have a podcast called the Legal Tea Podcast, and you produce cautionary tales episodes. Why do you think that so many people connect with those, with your show, especially those types of episodes?
So cautionary tales are real life cases that I have been involved in or worked on, or my firm has, I should say. A couple things. One, I think people thrive off of, juicy drama. And so they're like, oh, that happened. I also think it's very relatable as well. So another type of topic I talk about on Legal Tea is celebrity estate planning. And I personally think that there's a lot of things people can still learn from celebrity estate planning, because a lot of their mistakes and issues are very relatable to normal people. And I think, as you probably would agree with, Larry, that, these estate fights, people just love them. I mean, when they're not involved, right? They love to tell you about, their uncles, neighbors, grandma or whatever in Texas and what happened to them and and I'm like, oh, okay.
Everybody has a story, either that happened to them or they heard through somebody else. And, I think going back to your point about personalizing that plan, and one of those things being aware of is the family dynamics and the family situation. The only cautionary tale I would throw in there is even some of the best connected, most loving families, at the outset, when the matriarch or the patriarch pass away, things tend to go awry. Mm-hmm. And, it's a combination of grief intersected with money, intersected with personal ideas and goals, and maybe even some, manufactured issues that were in the documents themselves. So you have to even understand, and, you may think that your family's in the best situation possible, but, and it's a little unnerving to think about it, but you also have to think about, well, what if when I'm gone, it's not the most harmonious environment. How do I ensure that things are handled the way I would like them to or expect and be harmonious,
Yeah. Yeah.
because they tend to go awry, as you've probably seen many a time in your cautionary tales.
Yeah. Yeah. I, in the back of my mind, every time someone says, because I'm sure some of your listeners to this are probably thinking, my family would never.
Yes.
My kids would never fight. And I promise it has been a bazillion times that I have heard that from the patriarch and or matriarch, mom, dad, whoever, that will say that. And then there are fights.
Boom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
I think that, if you're using that, oh, that would never happen to my family as an excuse, just don't hear me loud and clear. A lot of people, and I'm not talking about, full-fledged estate litigation. Like not everyone will go to the depth of like lawyering up and fighting and but there are a lot of broken relationships because of estate plans and relationships and personalities and all that sort of thing. So, yeah. Oh my goodness. We could do a series of episodes of all of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, listen, talking about, cautionary tales, I think one of those kind of cautionary tales for me has been beneficiary designations. And, you mentioned that earlier as a way to avoid probate. And, I think beneficiary designations sometimes are overlooked in terms of, sometimes the easiest and best way to avoid probate and have your assets go where you want them to go. And, I think that there's a lack of knowledge out there. People don't even realize, my will dictates where it is. Well, if you have a beneficiary designation, then typically that trumps what's in those documents. And many times people don't realize that and may update their will, but not update their beneficiary designations. So what tips do you have for folks to, keep up their beneficiary designations, make sure that they're where they're up to date and in line with their wishes? What kind of actionable tips do you have for our listeners in that regard?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up because this is single-handedly one of, if not the biggest issues that I see in my world. It's such a common misconception. People think that when you do any kind of estate, will, trust, that it will just magically take care of all those beneficiary designations. And it won't. The beneficiary designations will trump what you've stipulated. Of course, unless you have it specifically referencing your will or trust. But so the amount of times that I've seen, things going to ex-spouses, I actually just was parents over kids. Yeah. Happens all the time. I tend to say that for about 1,000 different reasons, treat it as like an annual checkup, like your doctor. Just put something on your calendar, give it some type of, I have some clients that will do it like the day after tax day because they're like all into their financials and taxes, and they'll like calendar it on their phone or whatever, and they will check them annually. And that is a great way to make sure that you stay on top of those. I've seen where even when people have transitioned accounts, or maybe companies have like bought each other. I see it all the time with life insurance. So, life insurance companies will buy each other up, and sometimes the beneficiary designations get lost. And so just treating it as like an annual checkup. We see our doctor, or we're supposed to, at least once a year, because the issues that could come from not keeping those updated are just massive.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to our earlier point about simplification, right? If you have IRA accounts and retirement accounts or accounts all over the place, it's just going to make that annual review of the beneficiary designation so much more difficult. Yeah. If you have it in one location or two, makes it, far easier to keep track and update those designations over time.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. So true.
So, tying together points about avoiding probate, especially since many people are surprised that, number one, it's a public process. So if you go through probate, your assets are going to be, basically projected out there and able to be seen. And the cautionary tales you've shared, you talked about celebrity estate planning, offers some excellent real world examples. And I agree as well. Which celebrity estate stories stick with you as an example that the rest of us can learn from?
Yeah. So I actually want to do a quick mention. So talking about the probate being a public record. So this is a perfect example. So somewhat recently, the Indianapolis Colts, so I'm hailing from Indiana, the Indianapolis Colts owner, Jim Irsay, passed away. And I randomly thought about him earlier this week. And I was like, I wonder what's going on in his estate. And so I went to the court records. I found his estate. I have saved on my computer a copy of his last will and testament. So that is how public it can be. So it's a perfect example. Anyway, so, I've done so many celebrity estate planning episodes. A couple that really always have stuck out to me are, I'm going to do 3 very quick ones. One, Betty White, everyone's favorite grandma, did an amazing job at her estate planning. And the reason I know she did an amazing job at her estate planning is because we know nothing. We know nothing about who's in charge, who's the beneficiaries, how much her estate was worth. We know nothing. And so I give her an A+. Another one that stuck out was Kobe Bryant. I give him I'm going to call it like a B, maybe B+. Very great estate plan, but unfortunately, he failed to get his last daughter incorporated into the estate plan before his tragic accident. And so the court had to get involved to get that last kiddo as part of the estate plan. So that was really a lesson in keeping our estate plan updated as life happens. Right. And then I think the third is all the many, many celebrity estate planning episodes I've done of people that have done zilch, nothing. You think these people would have estate plans because they're surrounded by lawyers, right? But the massive list of people that I've done that flat have had no estate plan. So you think of Prince, Michael Jackson. I mean, there are just some biggie names there that it's like, come on. Right. Which tells me either it just wasn't a priority, or maybe if I use Prince and Michael Jackson, maybe they just didn't want to do and talk about it. There is that element for sure. So yeah, those are some of the big ones that stick out.
Yeah, great ones. I love that. I was wondering who Betty White was going to leave all her Snicker bars to, but we weren't able to learn that, unfortunately.
I'm going to guess there's some animal charities in there, but that's a mere guess.
Yeah, I mean, those are great examples, and I think you're right. I mean, it's just inherently some people find it problematic to do this planning. I mean, I've talked to many attorneys, and I'm sure it's happened to you. Family comes in, they engage you, give you a deposit, you start working on the documents, and the documents are still sitting in your office because they have yet years later to come in and sign them to execute them, because they feel like once they do, they're going to be marked men and women as a result. And I've always taken the opposite stance. I've redone my, I'm 50, I'm going to be 51. I've redone my estate plan probably 4 or 5 times over the last 30 years. And I feel better each time that I make the update, because I feel like I'm addressing it and putting my family in the best position possible. And I think, it's our job as advisors to kind of impart that upon the families we serve so they feel the same way, hopefully.
Yeah. And I would even take it a step further, that I take the position that, as, if I say parents, they should take that responsibility seriously to get their plan in place. I mean, if there is one goal that I hear over and over and over and over again from clients, is they want to make things easy. People have different definitions of what that means. But what I can say is, if that's the overarching goal that I hear from like 99% of clients, I mean, even I venture to say 100%. Like, who wants to like strategically make things hard? You know, it's I would consider it the responsibility of the person to get their affairs in order. If you don't, you're putting that time, work, and money, you're just shoving it on their plate. Either you do it or your loved ones do it. You pick.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah, that's about right. So thank you for sharing that. Even though we've been talking about maybe a morbid topic, I think it brings me a lot of joy helping people, and probably you as well, kind of navigating this space. And we're all about joy on the Midland Money Mindset. And our last question that we ask each of our guests, because our listeners have come accustomed to it. They want to hear these answers. They range so widely. And that is, what did you do today, Jenny, that brought you joy and put you in the right mindset for success?
I love this question. I am a glass half full girl through and through, to the point that sometimes it like makes me delusional, but I'm going to choose to say that that's fine. I think that, when, so you and I met via Twitter, or X. I still call it Twitter, as do a lot of people. And I reflected, I actually did a Twitter thread this morning and was really reflecting on my career and journey from sitting at the front desk of my law firm to now owning it with my husband. And, it just brings me so much gratitude and pride to like really reflect on that journey and appreciate it. It's a very unique journey for an attorney. I did not take a traditional path to get to where I am, and I'm so glad that things happened the way that they did. I wouldn't have it any other way.
Awesome. Well, that sounds like a very joyful reflection, and I thank you for sharing that with us. We're going to have all of your information in the show notes so that people can reach out, connect with you, learn more. But if people want to connect with you, just so we can leave them with something here, what's the easiest and the best way for them to connect with you and learn more about your firm?
Yeah, I am most active on Twitter, hands down, of all social media. So if you're wanting to sort of quietly just sort of sit in the passenger seat and just start learning about this field, I'd recommend following me there. Otherwise, if it's more, interested, I do try to remember to say this. I do a lot of podcasts, I do a lot of speaking, and sometimes I forget. And then my team is grouchy at me that because I'm in Indiana, I can only help Indiana residents. And so
Right.
If there's anyone that is interested in taking that next step, if you're in Indiana, great, happy to help you. If not, I have great referrals all across the country that I can connect you with. So either send me a message through Twitter, or you can connect through my law firm and they know to get it over to me. So, yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Thank you for being on the show. A lot of great actionable tidbits and ideas for our listeners. I'm sure they're going to be left thinking and hopefully making a phone call either to you if they're in Indiana, or to us if they're in New York, or to one of us to at least get a referral and get started. So I really enjoyed the conversation, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. It was so much fun. Thank you for having me.
Jenny, thank you for sharing your heart and helping us see estate planning for what it truly is, an act of love, not just paperwork. You gave voice to the fears so many families carry and offered a path to less stress through wills, trusts, and honest conversations. Your stories, your soul, and your wisdom from the legal tea are gifts, and we're so grateful you shared them with us today. Jenny Rozelle and all she's up to can be found across most social media platforms. All the contact information needed to find them can be found in the show notes.
The opinions voiced in the Midland Money Mindset Show with Lawrence Sprung are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. Past performance is no guarantee of future results. All indices are unmanaged and may not be invested into directly. Investing involves risk, including possible loss of principal. No strategy ensures success or protects against loss. To determine what may be appropriate for you, consult with your attorney, accountant, financial or tax advisor prior to investing. Investment advisory services offered through CWM LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. Guests on the Midland Money Mindset Show are not affiliated with CWM LLC.